You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Kurt Bjorklund.
This week we're talking about some of the attitudes that are destructive, and today I want to look at verse 9 in chapter 21 of Proverbs. It says this: "It's better to live in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." Now, this verse has led to a lot of humor and jokes over the years, but the idea ultimately is that quarrelsomeness, the Hebrew here is madan, it means to be in contention, to be a constant critic, to be somebody who's always finding fault, that you would rather live in a less pleasant place, the corner of a housetop, which in ancient Israel was a place that was exposed to the elements and would have been more akin to being homeless or barely housed versus somebody in a house that's shared with a quarrelsome wife. And so the simple better statement says basically, what could be worse than living in the corner of a housetop? And Robert Alter's commentary says this is like a riddle. And it's, well, living in a house with a quarrelsome wife. Another Proverbs talks about constant critique being a dripping faucet. Now, certainly, this is a word to the unmarried to make sure that if somebody is constantly unhappy with you pre-marriage, to know that when you get married and share a house with that person, that is not going to be a happy marriage. You would be better off being single and not in a house than with somebody who's constantly tearing you down. And to those who are married, obviously this is important to understand that just because you have the security of the relationship and even the role of speaking into your spouse's life in a way that nobody else does, that none of us like somebody who's constantly critiquing and picking on what we don't do well. And I think that's a word to everybody, because if you have kids, friends, roommates, whoever you're in relationship with, the way that you interact is important. And when you are quarrelsome, contentious, full of critique, what you do is you bring about damage to that relationship and a damage to the quality of life. And the truth is, it's not good for you either, because when you focus on what somebody does poorly or how they're not meeting your needs, you lose track of the good. And so this is really a reminder to pick your issues, to not elevate everything to something that has to be discussed, and to lean into what is good. And what you know, and I know from our own journey in life is that those who praise us and cast a vision for what we do right are people that we don't want to disappoint. But when we critique somebody, it's almost like they go the other way. I remember when I was growing up, one of the things that my parents always wanted me to do was to put dishes out of the sink and into the dishwasher. A simple task. And one of my parents would kind of say, if I didn't do it, "Why don't you do it? You do it wrong." That kind of a attitude. And the other one would praise me when I did it. They would say, "Oh, great job. You put your dishes in. Thanks for remembering," and all of that. And I remember distinctly as a kid just thinking, I want to do it when the one parent praises me, and the other parent, I almost want to leave it there just because they get on me. Now, that's a small example and from years ago, but I remember watching that play out with my own kids as they started to grow. If I cast a vision and talked about what they did right, they were much more apt to do it than if I critiqued. And so being critical, being quarrelsome, being contentious will almost never serve you well, instead of choosing to say, here's what's good. And if you think about it, this really goes back to this idea of pride and self-righteousness early in chapter 21, because it's the mindset that says, I always know what's best. And you should always give your best rather than saying, we're not always going to see it the same way, and sometimes I like how you do it better than how I do it. So today, will you choose not to be quarrelsome, critical, contentious in your important interactions?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.